What's up, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle coming to you now with the quarterback Week 15 start and sit episode. Already dropped tight end, so make sure if you haven't watched that yet, you go do that. Now, if you haven't watched it yet, I did make a little bit of a disclaimer in the tight end video, and I want to just bring that over to this video as well. I saw some comments last week that led me to believe that a lot of people either watched only the rankings videos last week or watched the rankings videos and didn't watch the entire start and sit episode. Now, because of that can cause some issues because my rankings are typically based on upside. The tight end start and sit video is what gives you a lot of the background information, why I feel this way, things like that. So I'm going to change it up a little bit this week. This is going to be super quick. I'm going to get through the start and sits here pretty fast, give you a few notes here and there. In the rankings episode, I'll try to break down some things a little bit more for you. So a little bit in reverse of what we have done typically this season with this video. Now, before we get moving forward, got to be transparent last week as always. And you know, sometimes you just have a bad day, right? And you say, man, I sucked today. I sucked at the quarterback position last Sunday. It was not good. Only 41%, my lowest score of any position this season. Now, the good news is, for my rankings on Fantasy Pros, I'm still top 30. I'm coming in, I believe, at like 28 or something right now. Overall, on the season, I have 153 rankers on Fantasy Pro. So far this season, not bad. Yes, it wasn't great last week. I had some bad misses last week, Drew Brees in particular. However, I saw a stat that said almost 40% of Yahoo League owners for Drew Brees had him sitting on their bench. So a lot of people believe that Drew Brees was going to have a bad week last week. Not only that, there were some guys that were misses. Aaron Rodgers was a miss. Patrick Mahomes was a miss. Russell Wilson was a miss. A lot of those top tier guys last week were misses. So unfortunately, that brought that percentage plummeting down. I mean, those three guys alone would have really changed the outcome of last week. So with that being said, some decent hits as well. But we got to move forward. We got to get better this week, and that's what we're going to be doing. So let's get ready to talk about it. We're going to jump into the quarterbacks here in Week 15 of the football season. Even with Lamar Jackson's injury, I'm still going to roll with him this week. He sounds like he's ready to go. Now, the one thing we might be missing from Lamar Jackson is a little bit of that running upside. He might not be nearly running as much as this week as he has in weeks past. So I may bump him down a couple of spots, but he's still a top 5 quarterback for me. And if you own him, you've rode him this far into the playoffs, you're not going to bench him now. He's in your lineup. He's the #1 quarterback on the season. He's been excellent every single week. We're not going to give up on him now. Even with this injury looming large, we are not sitting Lamar Jackson in Week 15. And with as good as Sam Darnold has been weekly, or the last few weeks, in and out of some matchups, I'm not seeing nearly enough upside to play him on Thursday night this week against Baltimore, so we're going to look for better options outside of Sam Darnold in Week 15. Yes, it is Cincinnati. Yes, it is Tom Brady. No, I am not playing him this week. I'm going to list Tom Brady as a sit this week. Why? Well, because the stats just haven't been great. A lot of times we've been playing him based on name value alone over the last few weeks, but he only has one 300-yard game since Week 6. And since Week 3, he only has 3 multi-touchdown performances. It has been a roller coaster. Yes, he has a really good matchup, but Sony Michel and James White, what if we see a lot of those guys this week? What if they go back to the run game against a team that hasn't been able to stop the run and really reinforce that this week and try to take some of that off of Tom Brady? Heck, he could go out there and he could throw for maybe 200 yards and a couple of touchdowns. But is that going to be enough? What if he throws one pick to go with it? What if he doesn't complete enough? There's just too much that I could see going wrong this week for us to rely on him in Week 15 of our fantasy football playoffs. I really believe truly that we can find some better options this week. So if you own Tom Brady, let's pivot to someone with a lot more upside. And for Andy Dalton, we're going to go ahead and sit him. Yes, the New England defense hasn't been nearly as good here in the second half as they were in the first half, but Andy Dalton does not constitute a start for me this week against that defense. Even with the hand injury, I'm still going to roll with Jameis Winston this week. Yes, he's been at practice. No, he's not been practicing, but we're going to keep an eye on it. Now, if Jameis Winston were to sit, then yes, we're going to go ahead and move away from the quarterback position for Tampa Bay this week. But if he's playing, he's in for me, especially against Detroit. Now, on the other side for David Blau, yes, he stepped in a couple of weeks ago on Thanksgiving and looked pretty good, but really since that first half against Chicago, hasn't done a whole lot, so we're going to move away from him this week and find other options. This might be a little bit of a surprise as well to you, and you can call this a hot take or a bold prediction all you want to, and unfortunately I don't have the tweet to show you the stat that I found, but I thought this was really interesting on Twitter this week, and I'm so sorry I can't give credit to it because I can't find the tweet anymore, and I can't find who it came from. However, somebody had tweeted that quarterbacks over the last several years playing in games that start below 10 degrees temperature, and that's what this game will start as, the stats have been horrific, absolutely horrific. It's basically just above a touchdown per game and over an interception per game with about 200 yards passing tops. It's not good. In this game, it's going to be very, very cold. Expect a lot of the running game. Mitchell Trubisky, he has been hot of late. And trust me, if this game was being played in the middle of the day with temperatures that were more along the lines of the 30s or the 40s, I would roll with both of these quarterbacks. But it is supposed to be so cold this week in Green Bay that I just can't sit by and see that these two guys present enough upside to get them both into your lineup. Heck, Aaron Rodgers had an awesome opportunity last week and did absolutely nothing for us. So I'm going to go ahead and skip on both quarterbacks this week and play it safe and look for some different options. Deshaun Watson starts this week because he's Deshaun Watson, the rock star Deshaun Watson. We are not going to sit him in any matchup the rest of the season. On the flip side, Ryan Tannehill, he has been awesome. Houston giving up the 6th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Expect more of that this week with Tannehill and Watson. Yeah, Patrick Mahomes hasn't been great for several weeks now. In fact, he's been outside of QB1 contention for quite a while. However, we're still going to continue to play him because Patrick Mahomes can become Patrick Mahomes again at any point in time. I will still play him regardless of what his upside has looked like. With Drew Lock, I desperately want to put him in the start column this week. I absolutely do. In fact, I have a playoff team right now where I'm going to be starting Drew Lock because it's a super flex league. So there might be some considerations that you can make for him because of how good he's been. However, in a one quarterback league, I think you can find a lot better options. I think he's going to be close to hitting that 18 points, but not quite getting there. Kansas City continues to be really good against the pass and against quarterbacks, so I'm going to go ahead and try to find somebody else to help out this week. Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be a start for me this week against the New York Giants. Heck, Carson Wentz looked really good last week with barely any weapons. So let's run with Ryan Fitzpatrick and see what happens this week. Now, on the other side for Eli Manning, yeah, he looked good throwing the ball to Darius Slayton there in the first half of that game. And then it all disappeared in the second half, and they just weren't moving the ball as effectively in the second half against the Miami Dolphins. At home, yeah, some potential, but even as good as Eli Manning was in the first half last week, he still only scored 16 fantasy points, which is not enough for him to be a start on this episode. And you heard me say just a second ago, Carson Wentz, even with no weapons last week, was still a hit. So we're going to go ahead and roll with him again this week. I think he can still get enough done, even though he doesn't have really any weapons to help him out right now at the wide receiver position. The running game looked pretty decent last week with Boston Scott in there helping out, Miles Sanders, of course, and then the tight ends, Ertz and Goddard. More than enough to get things done this week against the Washington Redskins. Dwayne Haskins, not even going to try it with him, even though Eli Manning looked, again, pretty good in the first half against Philadelphia. Didn't look nearly as good in the second half. Not going to rely on Haskins this week. Russell Wilson hasn't been a quarterback one in about 3 weeks now. So is it due for a performance? I think so. After taking the loss last week, they need to keep rolling, though. They can't fall out of the playoff picture. They are going to need to get rolling against Carolina this week, and I think Russell Wilson, a guy that's been an MVP candidate basically all season long, gets it done. A couple weeks ago, I told you I'm not going to start Kyle Allen anymore. I'm done with it, over it, not going there. And then I made that decision to start him last week, which was awful. So we're not going to start him this week. We're going to move on from Kyle Allen. No more, I promise you this time, Headliner Nation. No more Kyle Allen. I see virtually no upside in this matchup for either quarterback this week. Derek Carr, he just hasn't had any upside for a while now. And for Gardner Minshew, yeah, he looked good earlier in the season. Minshew Mania got all of us. But I'm not going to play him this week. He wasn't a quarterback one. He wasn't near 18 points last week. And now he has to go to Oakland. And Oakland, even though they've been a little up and down this season, the defense has been a little bit better at home. So I think they're going to get to Minshew a little bit this week. I think it's going to be a whole lot of Leonard Fournette in Oakland this week. And Gardner Minshew is going to have a limited ceiling that's going to be more towards the run game instead of the passing game. Baker Mayfield, he's going to be on track this week against Arizona giving up a ton of points to opposing quarterbacks this year. Baker Mayfield is going to get his this week on the road in Arizona. And for Kyler Murray, we're going to toss him back into the start column this week as well. I think he's going to get back in there, get you 18 points this week. More than likely, if you're this far into the season at this point, Kyler Murray is not an option for you. However, maybe you could possibly stream him this week if you're dealing with any injuries, or if it's a 2-quarterback league or Superflex league, you're definitely going to play him this week. It just depends on other options. He's probably going to be a little bit lower on the start column for me or in my rankings in terms of my starters. So keep an eye out on that episode and we'll see where he officially lands come this weekend. Kirk Cousins was a severe disappointment against Detroit last week. They just didn't get the job done. They did in terms of a win, but in terms of fantasy points outside of Dalvin Cook, not a whole lot. Stephon Diggs was all right. Kyle Rudolph didn't do anything. Kirk Cousins only had 1 touchdown pass. So they're going to get going this week against the Los Angeles Chargers again. And for Phillip Rivers, I said it earlier, something got into him this past week. He had a huge game. He was a start this past week. I had him as a sit. I'm going to go back to having him as a sit this week just because against Minnesota, I'm just not going to see him having too well of a game. I think they're going to be in the backfield quite a bit. They're going to be causing some issues, knock him around a little bit. He's going to have to stay upright and make some passes, but a whole lot of pressure in his face this weekend. Jared Goff, I had his name as a start, then as a sit, then as a start, then I thought about putting him back as a sit, then I ended up ultimately landing him as a start. And the reason is Dallas just hasn't been that good against quarterbacks lately. I mean, they got burned on the road against Mitchell Trubisky last week. I'll give Jared Goff enough credit that he can hit 18 points this week, even though it is on the road. I'll roll with him this week with a fairly healthy team now. Now, outside of that, Dak Prescott, yeah, I'm going to put him back in the start column. Wasn't great last week. Wasn't bad either. He still ended up getting to 300 yards last week. Still didn't have an awful game. Just didn't go the way that they wanted to at home against this week. They have to win to stay atop of the division. They have to win to stay in the playoff race. Philadelphia with that big win this past week against New York when they thought they were going to end up losing. A lot of people did. They ended up pulling that game out at the very end. Dallas has to win this week. A lot of urgency, and Dak Prescott's going to be the guy. He's going to get you 18 fantasy points. The San Francisco 49ers got a very important win on the road against New Orleans last week. However, if you don't think that defense is sitting in meeting rooms this week, chomping at the bits to get back on the field and shut down Matt Ryan, then you're kidding yourself, because that defense is going to be ready to roll this weekend. I said it in the episode last week that it had been since week 2 since they had given up over 200 passing yards. They had only given up one 200-yard passing game since week 2, and it was to Kyler Murray. He had 204 yards. Their defense was rolling heading into the Superdome last week. They got shredded. They're going to get back on track this week against Matt Ryan. Missing Calvin Ridley this week, a much-needed weapon that he's leaned on this season. Julio wasn't bad last week, but again, he's banged up a little bit right now. He just hasn't been himself. I think at home, you're going to see San Francisco be in Matt Ryan's face. Austin Hooper is really the only weapon outside of Julio Jones I think has any value this week against San Francisco, but Matt Ryan's going to be hard-pressed to get to 18 points. And for Jimmy Garoppolo, the dude is playing amazing right now. At the beginning of the season, he was playing good as a quarterback, but he wasn't providing any fantasy value, and that has changed recently. This is a guy that we're 100% starting this week against Atlanta. Devlin Hodges, not a bad game last week. He didn't end up being a hit, though, because he just missed 18 fantasy points. So we're going to go ahead and list him as a sit this week, going up against the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills, primetime on Sunday night. Whew, boy, they're going to want to get going. They're going to want to get a huge win in Pittsburgh this week. That's why I'm going to trust Josh Allen to run out there and get us a fantasy victory this week, scoring over 18 fantasy points, a little bit on the ground, a little bit through the air, but more than enough that you're going to need to make sure that he's in your lineup. Finally, on Monday Night Football, we're going to go with Jacoby Brissett and Drew Brees, both as starts this week. Yes, I had him as a sit last week. Not even considering that this week against Indianapolis. A big game for him potentially coming up again here in Week 15. But for Jacoby Brissett, the New Orleans defense hasn't been great. They've given up a lot of points to both tight end and wide receiver over the last 4 weeks. even though that offense is banged up. Jack Doyle, I see, could have a big week this week. I also see Zach Pascal having a big week this week as well. And then, of course, they've had some other options mix in and out. But Jacoby Brissett, I think, on the road is going to get you to those 18 fantasy points just because there has been so many fantasy points scored against New Orleans from tight end and wide receiver over the last 4 weeks. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Week 15 start and sit episodes are in the book. Finally, get ready for some Thursday night football. But don't forget, hit that like button down below. And if you have not become a part of Headliner Nation yet, make sure you do that by hitting the subscribe button as well. Leave us any questions down in the comments below. And good luck in your Week 15 matchups. Don't miss out on our rankings videos, though. Again, I said at the start of the video, really for you to get the most information possible and really get some detailed, in-depth review of what we're looking at this week, you got to take these episodes and put them together. So hopefully you check out those videos later in the week as well. Have a great week. We'll catch you a little bit later. Have a good one.